Welcome to the Invested Dads Podcast, simplifying financial topics so that you can take action and make your financial situation better. Helping you to understand the current world of financial planning and investments, here are your hosts, Josh Robb and Austin Wilson.
All right. Hey, welcome back to the Invested Dads Podcast, a podcast where we take you on a journey to better your financial future. Today, Josh, we're going to be talking about the Olympics and the financial impact it has on the host country right now. I mean, depending on when this comes out, they're either just wrapped up or kind of wrapping up at this point.
That's right.
So
USA.
Woo,
Go USA.
Okay, well, you need to calm down a little bit because the bald eagle on your shoulder scared me a little bit, so let's pause that. Let's pause that. He's looking hungry, and I have this zucchini chocolate muffin. Zucchini. It's
chocolate zucchini.
Heavy
More
chocolate than zucchini.
There's the ratio.
Was this for Sawyer?
That was my oldest daughter's chocoholic.
I know she was a chocoholic,
and she requested those. So
that's going to be
made them. They're great. Brought some in to share.
That's the reward of
that'll be
recording this episode.
Eat the muffin.
It's pretty much a salad.
It's got to be. I mean, it's a vegetable muffin, so it's good for you. All around.
I'm pretty excited. So yes, Summer Olympics, they're either going on or they're kind of wrapping up. And we thought it would be fun to look at the financial aspect of the Olympics. So let's start at the process for a country to kind of become the host of the Olympics and all the costs that go into that.
Yep. So like you said, Tokyo is one that won the rights to host the 2020 Summer Olympics.
I know. First
which
of all,
in 2021.
We're in 2021. We're doing the 2020 Olympics. Now, does that mean in 3 years we're going to have the next one? But next year we're going to have the winter.
Yes. I don't think they're changing anything else besides this.
I have been to Tokyo. It is a big city.
Yes.
I like it a lot. It's fun. Good time. Apparently right now, during the Olympics going on, they're having a bunch of protests that the Olympics should have still been canceled, but they're clearly not because they're going on right now. No bueno.
Well, let's look at the process. So in order to host the Olympics, you have to be selected by the Olympic Committee, International Olympic Committee. And since 1999, this process has kind of consisted of two phases. The first one is any city that is interested in hosting the Olympics will submit a bid before the deadline. And
so
then once the deadline,
Finley could submit
anybody. Yep.
Let's do it.
And actually, I saw in researching this that for this 2020 Olympics, the U.S. So each country usually has their own Olympic committee that then manages all the sports and all stuff. They refused to submit a bid because they are having some sort of feud with the International Olympic Committee over something. I'm not even sure what, but they didn't want to submit a bid even though they were kind of hoping at least one U.S. But Las Vegas, on their own, outside of any kind of support, they submitted their own bid on their own, but it was rejected by the Olympic Committee, probably because they didn't have the full support of the U.S. piece of it. Anyway, side note there. So you submit your application, and then these applicant cities are required to answer this questionnaire, and it covers they have all these questions, and they look at the city size and their infrastructure and environmental impact for everything. And so all this stuff goes in. All right. Then the IOC, they analyze these and they narrow it down. All right. They're looking at the strengths and weaknesses and all that. Okay. Once they do that, then they push it down to the next phase where since they, maybe there was 30 cities. Okay. And now we're down to 5.
Here's the realistic options.
Here's the ones that we have said for this next one. It doesn't mean, for instance, we'll talk about it. Tokyo tried earlier and failed, and then they went again.
You're not out.
Yeah. Another year you can try again. But for this Olympics, this time frame, they narrow it down, and then once they accept those, they're now candidate cities. So they went from applicant cities to candidate cities, and they're now required to submit a second questionnaire, which is just a more detail of what the original thing was. Because, they may say in the original thing, we will have 500 new hotels within X miles, whatever. And then they're going to want details. So actually play this out first. What is it going to be, right? So they do more details. By the way, a typical city will spend somewhere between $50 and $100 million between consultants, organizers, travel related to all this. That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
Tokyo in 2016, which was for the prior Olympics, they bid on that. They spent $150 million and lost that bidding process. So that money is gone. They spent $75 million and were successful in 2020. They streamlined.
That $75 million probably just went to update the analysis that was done from the 2016 bid.
But
what that's showing also is that there's like a 4-year lead on these things.
yeah.
Because just as we're sitting here, it was a week or two ago, well, Australia got announced as the 2024 Summer Games.
Yeah, and it's
Sydney?
some of them are even farther ahead than that.
Yeah.
They're announcing because there's a time frame. You got to build out that infrastructure.
Oh,
you
yeah.
got to build those places that are going to host the events. So that's just a reference point. So there's a lot of money spent on this. The members of the committee also make a 4-day inspection of each of those candidate cities to see kind of where their proposed venues are going to be, go into more details about all the stuff that's going on within that proposal. So, if you're Tokyo and you say, hey, this is where I'm putting the swimming pool, and you walk around like it's on the side of a mountain. Like this is
Where's this going to go?
It's not going to be ideal.
Right.
And so like you got to go through and lay it out. So then once they have that, they actually, this was interesting. I did not know this. When the IOC meets to decide the winner, they always meet in a country that did not submit an application.
Neutral.
Yes.
Neutral
that
ground.
way there's no
No bias,
form. And
right.
There's been issues in the past about corruption and, people paying some of those committee members to vote one way or another. And the voting process pretty much is each round they vote until there's a majority for one city. So the first round, there may be, 8 or 10 cities, and
right.
they're spread out between the committee members, and you don't have, an absolute majority. So they'll say, okay, which ones didn't get it, throw them out, revote until they get that last one.
Yep. So here's a question. It's not really related to this, but it popped into my head. So I had friends who were swimmers in college. Mm-hmm. They said that it was considered good luck and kind of their duty to pee in every pool
That's a weird.
that
I've heard that a lot.
swim
Yeah.
that they competed in.
Yes.
Do these Olympics are the premier swimmers in the entire world?
I'm going to tell you.
Do they pee in the Olympic pool?
I'm going to tell you that a lot of athletes are superstitious. So
if they did it somewhere else,
is if they did it and kept winning,
they're going to do it again.
you better believe they kept
and you
doing
might be
that.
lighter weight.
Who knows?
You might be okay. That was not related, but
now with all these new suits,
you
they're
mentioned
probably
pool.
like
Yeah.
pools. All right. So once that city is chosen, like you said, it's years down the road
Correct.
from when they're actually going to host the Olympics. All right. So their job then is to then start building out not only the facilities, but the infrastructure, because you're going to have a lot more people coming in for this event.
Yeah, Tokyo has cardboard beds for everyone.
Yes, I saw that.
That's real.
So yeah, it's
Who knows why?
interesting. 40,000 people. They estimate that within like the Olympic Village, you need 40,000 available hotel rooms or places to stay. And so there's a lot that needs built out. Most cities don't have that ready to go.
We
There's
don't.
additional stuff built. So all that rail lines, if you watch the Olympics, not everybody, Tokyo is hosting, but some of these events are not directly downtown. I mean, you're
yeah.
moving around.
Yeah.
You may be a half an hour away for one event to another.
Yep.
If you think back to like the Winter Olympics that they had over in Sochi,
Yep.
that you were traveling, because if you're going down this mountain that's designed for
skiing, that's not going to be great for figure skating,
right? And you're all over. So transportation is important, all that stuff. A couple examples. Overall infrastructure, they say, costs somewhere between $5 and $50 billion. That's big.
It's a big swing.
Rio, which was more recent
Brazil.
Olympics. Yep. Constructed 15,000 new hotel rooms to help accommodate for tourists.
Okay.
Sochi invested approximately $42.5 billion for non-sports structures in the 2014 Olympics. So that's just an example of now. Those things are still available post-Olympics, right? And they can be used.
Right.
And we'll talk about that a little bit. London paid $14.6 billion when they hosted the Olympics and the Paralympics. That's the other thing too. Paralympics and Olympics go together at all these places. They had that in 2012. So of $14.6 billion from London, we actually have the breakdown. $4.4 billion came from taxpayers.
Your tax dollars hard at work.
And that you'll see this as the case in a lot of places. Beijing spent $42 billion in 2008. Athens spent $15 billion in 2004. And in fact, Athens, their taxpayers will pay about $56,635 annually until this debt is paid off.
Not
Now-
each taxpayer. Mm-hmm. Really?
Now, if you recall, they had some issues
With their banking
the debt-
system?
with
Yeah.
debt, and they've had some. It was a burden too much, and that was part of the revolt. And so that was kind of the estimate of what needed to be paid to pay off this debt per person. Now, obviously, they're not writing check every individual
No,
like doing that,
exactly.
but that was if you just took the debt by people,
It's spread
that was
across
that was
corporations
what was
and
owed.
high income
Yeah.
earners
Right.
and stuff. Yeah.
But that was just to give you an idea of kind of the cost for hosting the Olympics. Beijing, they spent over $22.5 billion just building the roads and airports and stuff. And then they spent $11 billion on environmental cleanup, because that's part of the thing that the
especially
Olympic
going
Committee
forward
looks at is what will be the environmental impact on this whole thing, and they want you to offset some of that.
So you've laid out a lot of costs. This is a very costly thing to do.
Yes.
It does not seem like it is a money-making endeavor.
So it is not for most places.
Unless you're a winner as an individual at a country,
Yes.
then you do okay.
Los Angeles is the only host city that realized a profit from the gains, and that was back a handful of years ago, and no one has done it since then. And so that's just...
Well, let me tell you what. Los Angeles last hosted the Olympics in 1984.
That was the last
So that was
time
the last
a
profit.
city turned a profit. In fact, here's another stat I found. In 2006, Montreal finally finished paying off the debt from their games,
30 years.
which they hosted in 1976.
Yeah, exactly. 30 years of...
gives you an idea.
That's crazy.
But there is income from this.
Oh, yeah.
Why would a city want to do it? It's a couple things. One, the prestige being, yay, look what we did. The second one is you do bring in income, and you do have continuing income because people still visit those places. You can still go to certain places and see those events, the all the stuff that was built up for it. And so London brought in $5.2 billion, and they spent $18 billion. So there's
$13 billion. Yeah.
Now that was on the event. Now again, the carryover is in future years, the hotels you built, they're still having people get their room. So you make up more of that money over time. Vancouver brought in $2.8 billion after spending $7.6. So a little bit narrow gap there, and that was the Winter Olympics. Beijing had $3.6 billion of income and spent $40 billion on the Summer Olympics. That was a big gap there.
Loss there.
Yep, and then I already mentioned Los Angeles was the last one to actually have a profit.
That is significant, not making money usually.
Right. Yeah.
But like you said, there is a lot more that goes into it. I'm sure that there's a lot of subsidies and everything from the government that would probably come from
And
that
what's
too.
important to note out is a lot of these cities, the money spent on infrastructure especially is, one, probably needed, and two, is a long-term benefit because you improve roads, railroads, all that stuff. That's going to be, it's hard to put a dollar amount on what you actually got out of that because you're not getting straight income from those things. So it's one of those things you just got to understand. Cities aren't getting into this because they end up with profit necessarily. They get into this because, one, it's great revenue booster for a short term for especially small business owners and those type of things in the area, because when they come in, they're spending for food and all that stuff. But from a city itself and a budget standpoint, you're not making money.
Okay. You know what you can put a price tag on, though?
What's that?
A dad joke of the week.
Dad joke. It's priceless.
I got you, Josh. Why can't pirates finish the alphabet? They get lost at
They
sea.
barely get into that alphabet.
Or they lost an I.
They lost an I. Either one of those works.
Or they can't. They once they get to X, they stop.
Yeah, because that marks the spot.
See, I got
You got a lot of those
here.
jokes. Goes anyway for that.
r/dad jokes. Reddit.
That's perfect.
Follow it. Love it.
We got lost.
So we've kind of looked, historically speaking, at how countries, how cities, bid and win the rights, really, to have the Olympics on their location. We've talked about the expenses that they occur to prepare for that, which is substantial. Then we offset that with the income that they generate from that. That's really all historically looking. Let's turn the page to 2020/2021 because it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the 2020 Olympics happening in 2021, and we're in Tokyo. So talk a little bit about the current Olympic situation in Tokyo.
Yeah. So if, like you said, they were originally supposed to happen last summer. COVID-19, the virus that caused them to push it a year back. The hope was that they would be able to recoup some of those missed costs because as of last year, there's no vaccine. There was no way of safely hosting. We're at a spot now where the Olympic Committee in Tokyo felt like they could host this with a lot better safety measures in place. One of the things is that they have restricted the number of spectators.
Some events have none.
Yes, and worth noting that local ticket sales usually account for 70 to 80% of the total income from the game.
So you thought those earlier Olympics were money-losing endeavors? This one's going to be even more.
Yep. So fans are now banned from many events or limited in capacity. The Olympic organizers announced in March that they had to refund over 600,000 tickets.
Whoa.
So that's a big deal.
That is crazy.
Yep. And then last December, they announced that the total cost for holding out on waiting was $15.4 billion. And that includes all their build up to it as well. And then $2.4 billion was unprecedented postponement from then to now. So the projected post bill for all this has risen now to $3 billion, because that was December. So now $3 billion cost on top of what they had already spent, that 15 whatever. And so it's now projected to be upwards of $26 billion when you count in like the lost revenue. So that was actual cost incurred for delaying it. But then when you look in the impact of fewer spectators, all that, it's now going to be maybe $26 billion overall hit from everything.
So
it's crazy.
Obviously, there's some big bills. And how are these big bills funded? Well, a lot of that is through sponsorships. We've seen that in pretty much every Olympics. But TV ads are big, and local advertisements on banners and stuff is huge. So more than 60 Japanese companies together paid a record of more than $3 billion to sponsor the games. Additional sponsors paid another $200 million to extend contracts from last year after they were postponed to this year. But ironically, that has been kind of put on hold because a lot of those Japanese companies, I'm thinking big Japanese companies, Toyota is the big one that comes to my mind, they're pulling their sponsorship money right now. They are not happy that Japan continued to have these Olympics in spite of everything that's going on. And therefore, these billions of dollars that they were going to pay for their sponsorship, they've now pulled out. So the Olympic situation in Japan, while it will probably have some great television, I'm anticipating watching quite a bit of good Olympic competition. The financial situation for a country that's already, been on a slow growth motion for a long time is not going to get any better.
Yeah. And so you mentioned watching the Olympics. So NBC Universal has the rights. Comcast is their parent company. So Comcast, they paid $4.38 billion. So far, they brought in $1.25 billion for just this games, and that was for pre-postponement. And so now, their sponsors looking again this year to say, okay, are there people wanting to pay more for additional sponsorship for this year? So if you look at $1.25 billion, if you paid $4 and you got how many 4 Olympics during that time frame, okay, you're probably getting close to breaking even or making a little profit off that deal.
Well, and if you think about it, $4 billion I'm thinking NBC had to come up with the money to pay for that, obviously. Sure, they had a great variety of ways to do that, but that expires this year, this agreement. So that was 4 Olympics they got, expiring in 2021, but for 2020 Olympics. It's pretty much up for bid probably for the next round.
Will be in there.
And you know who's going to be players in the next round? Streaming companies. Like, I'm thinking Amazon likely is going to be writing checks to try and get this to work. Apple could. Who knows? These companies with exclusive streaming is going to be big. Yeah, NBC obviously can continue to do it with their Peacock service.
Yep. But I'm wondering if there's obviously the U.S. Olympic Committee probably has a say in this. And the thing about NBC is it's free over airs, right? You don't have to have any service to receive that. If you have an antenna, you're close to at least some city, you can get it. So I'm wondering if that has a weighting too, if they'll have to work out some deal that, yes, let's say Amazon gets the rights, but you also have to make sure that at least the primary events are available. Something like that, I wonder.
Because from a business case for a company like Amazon, they could write a $4 billion check or $10 billion check tomorrow and host the next 6 Olympics and be done. But I think that there probably is some fair and equitable distribution kind of discussion that goes along with that. So this is a unique Olympic, obviously. This Olympics is happening in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic that's kind of still going on, and in some instances around the world, kind of getting a little worse right now. Talk about some statistics about COVID and this specific Olympics.
So these numbers are as of July 20th, all right? So this is right before the ceremony opened, the official ceremony started, and 71 athletes had already tested positive for COVID-19. And then in this same time period, July 20th, Japan had an increase in cases, about a 26% increase from the prior week, or 1,700 cases.
Well, there's a lot more people there.
There are. And so that's part of, you talk about the protests, that's part of what they're worried about is, if you bring in a lot of people flying in, there could be a chance for this to start spreading again.
Yeah, exactly. And Japan is not, like a lot of the world, is not yet caught up to the level that the U.S. is in terms of vaccination rates and like that. So the general public is going to be less apt to be thrilled about going out and doing those sort of things. Hence the protests that we're talking about here. Wow, that's a lot.
This is a financial podcast.
I know I can't let this podcast wrap up without talking numbers and nerdiness because that's what I do. So I'm going to get a little nerdy. And I received an email from a great data provider that we use called Bespoke Investment Group. They're great. They have some really cool insights into this stuff, but some statistics about the markets during Olympic times.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that. So during the summer, we're talking specifically Summer Olympic Games, historically speaking, so we can go all the way back to the 1928, so almost 100 years worth of Olympics. The 1928 Olympics, all the way till now, well, I guess through 2016 Olympics in the summer, the S&P 500 has been positive during the Olympic time period, 57% of the time. Okay? The S&P 500 has returned an average, so that, as we know, averages can be skewed, but an average of 1.67% over that couple-week period.
Yeah, it's about 3 weeks, right? Total, give or take.
So the middle of that, so the median, however, is only 0.13% of return. So essentially flat.
Outliers,
Yeah, so it's essentially, there were some really big numbers. For example, the positive financial performance that Los Angeles provided, the S&P 500 was up 9.41%
oh boy, they
for
like
that week, for that few week
Olympics.
period in 1984. Another outlier in 1932 for the prior Los Angeles Olympics.
They hosted it.
They hosted it again. That the S&P 500 was up 16.09% in that period.
That was in the 30s, huh?
Now, that time period in the late 20s and early 30s, if we know about what happened, that was a really rough time in the stock market.
It was all over the place.
A terrible sell-off. I mean, 50% would have been light. It was like 80%. And so rebounds happened like that, 16%. But anyway, funny that the two biggest returns happened when the Olympics were held in Los Angeles. But if you look at it a little bit differently, if you look at the host country stock market, and these are returns in their local currency, but the host country stock market, for example, Rio de Janeiro in 2016, the Brazilian stock market was up 2.49% over that period. London in 2012, 3.91%. 2008, now there was a lot of other things going on in 2008.
Apparently, I heard.
Beijing, the Chinese stock market was down 7.69% during that period. It's just crazy, some of these numbers. But if you look at them in the same terms that we had just talked about, those local country stock markets were positive 77.8% of the time.
That's nice.
So that's even better than the 57.1% of the S&P 500.
Yeah.
The median, or the middle return, so that's usually a better indicator, was up 2.49% for the host country. And the average was actually lower at 1.82%. Interesting. So anyway, if you're looking to make bazillions of dollars from big stock market swings in the Olympic time period, that's probably not the best bet right now.
Yeah. If you're only investing once every 4 years for the Summer Olympics.
And the averages typically have averaged some pretty muted returns. So I wouldn't get your hopes up for a gigantic rally at this point. But
what I would like to see is the stats on countries that have the most gold medal wins and how that correlates to the stock market.
We need to get on.
Man, that would be
Paul.
Yeah, total
Paul
market
from
count,
Bespoke.
total medal count per market performance.
It's happening.
Irrelevant.
Next year.
That's what it
Next
would be.
Olympics, Josh.
That's what it would be.
It would be totally irrelevant. Yeah. Is that a leading indicator?
No, it's not.
When America wins the most medals, does our stock market outperform for the next decade? Or 4 years? We'll see. So anyway, that was my nerdiness, but I wanted to remind our amazing listeners two things. Number one, it's still not too late. It is still not too late to enter our 2021 second half stock draft competition. It's not too late. Go ahead and do that. If you entered now, you might actually be beating people because some people like me have already lost money with fake money.
I think I'm in last place. So,
well, I wasn't going to bring that up, Josh.
It's all right.
As always, number two, check out our free gift to you. It's a brief list of 8 principles of timeless investing. These are overarching investment themes meant to keep you on track to meet your long-term goals. It's free on our website. We don't mention the Olympics in that at all. Good to know, though. Josh, how can people help us grow this podcast?
Yeah, make sure you subscribe. That way, every Thursday, you get our most recent episode sent right to wherever you listen. leave us a review at Apple Podcast. It's always great. Helps us rank higher so that more people can find us. If you have any questions or thoughts about the Olympics, you can shoot us an email at hello@theinvesteddads.com. And then if you know somebody who loves the Olympics, you can share this episode with them. Maybe they'll find something interesting. All right, we will talk to you next time.
Until next Thursday, have a great week.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Invested Dads podcast. This episode has ended, but your journey towards a better financial future doesn't have to. Head over to theinvesteddads.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and we had a positive impact on your life, leave us a review, click subscribe, and don't miss the next episode. Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.